The crystal vase shattered against the marble floor, missing Jayden's head by inches. "You clumsy little brat," Marissa's voice echoed through the empty mansion, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the boy's thin shoulder. "Do you know how much that cost? More than your pathetic life is worth." 10-year-old Jayden trembled, his dark eyes wide with terror as he stared at the glittering shards scattered around his bare feet. Blood trickled from a small cut on his arm where a piece had grazed him. He wanted to cry, to scream, to run, but he'd learned months ago that any reaction only made things worse. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I was just trying to dust like you asked." "Sorry?" Marissa's laugh was cold and sharp. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. The woman who smiled so sweetly at his father now wore a mask of pure hatred. "Sorry doesn't fix expensive things, you little parasite. Sorry doesn't make up for the fact that you exist, stealing resources that should be mine." She released him with a shove that sent him stumbling backward. His foot landed on a shard of glass, and he bit his lip hard to keep from crying out. "Clean this up, every single piece. And if your father asks about the vase, you broke it while playing. Understand?" Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Because if you tell him the truth, I'll make you regret the day you were born, more than you already do." Jayden nodded quickly, tears burning behind his eyes but refusing to fall. He'd learned to hold them in. Tears only made Marissa angrier. As she walked away, her heels clicking against the marble with each step, Jayden dropped to his knees and began picking up the pieces with shaking hands. This wasn't how his life was supposed to be. This wasn't the family his mother would have wanted for him. But his mother was gone, and no one was coming to save him. The story of how Jayden Cross ended up in this nightmare began 3 years earlier, when his world first fell apart. Nathaniel Cross had been a different man when Jayden's mother, Elizabeth, was alive. He'd been present, loving, the kind of father who attended every school play and knew his son's favorite bedtime story by heart. Their mansion in the hills of Los Angeles had been filled with laughter and warmth, despite its size and grandeur. Then came the accident. A rainy night, a distracted driver, and Elizabeth was gone in an instant. Nathaniel had retreated into his grief, burying himself in work, expanding his technology empire across 3 continents while his son wandered the halls of their home like a ghost. The servants tried their best, but Jayden needed his father, not hired help. Mrs. Evelyn Porter, the housekeeper who'd been with the family since Jayden was born, did what she could. She made sure he ate, helped with homework, held him when nightmares about his mother woke him in the middle of the night. But even her kindness couldn't fill the void Elizabeth had left behind. Nathaniel knew he was failing his son. The guilt ate at him during late nights in his office, when he'd look at family photos and wonder how everything had fallen apart so quickly. His business partners suggested he needed to move on, to find someone who could help him rebuild his family. That's when he met Marissa Hale at a charity gala. She was stunning, elegant, and seemingly compassionate. She worked as an event coordinator for high-profile clients, moving in circles adjacent to Nathaniel's world. When she spoke about her volunteer work with children, her eyes had misted over. When she met Jayden for the first time, she'd been patient and kind, complimenting his drawing and asking about his interests with genuine-seeming curiosity. Nathaniel, desperate and lonely, saw what he wanted to see: a woman who could be a mother to his grieving son and a partner to help him navigate his pain. He never saw the calculations behind Marissa's warm smiles, never noticed how her affection cooled whenever his back was turned. The wedding happened quickly, barely a year after Elizabeth's death. Jayden had been uncertain, his memories of his mother still fresh and painful, but he tried to be happy for his father. Maybe this would bring the old dad back. Maybe things would get better. For the first few weeks, they did. Marissa played her role perfectly. She cooked family dinners, suggested movie nights, even helped Jayden with a school project. Nathaniel smiled more than he had in months. The house felt alive again. Then Nathaniel left for his first business trip after the honeymoon, a 2-week venture to oversee the opening of a new facility in Singapore. The moment his private jet left the runway, everything changed. Jayden was in the kitchen after school, reaching for the cookies Mrs. Porter had made that morning, when Marissa appeared in the doorway. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice was different, stripped of the warmth she used around Nathaniel. "Just getting a snack," Jayden said, confused by her tone. "Mrs. Porter said I could." "Mrs. Porter doesn't make the rules anymore, I do." Marissa crossed the room and snatched the cookie from his hand. "These aren't for you. Little boys who contribute nothing to this household don't deserve treats." Jayden stared at her, unable to process what was happening. "But Dad always lets me have cookies after school." "Your father isn't here." She ate the cookie herself, maintaining eye contact with him the entire time. "And when he's gone, things run differently. You want food, you earn it. There's a list of chores on the counter. Complete them by dinner, and maybe you'll eat tonight." She left him standing there, stunned and confused. The list contained tasks far beyond what was reasonable for a 10-year-old. Scrubbing all the bathrooms, organizing the garage, cleaning windows throughout the massive house. Tasks that would take hours. Mrs. Porter found him crying over the bathroom tile an hour later, his hands red and raw from harsh chemicals. "Oh, sweet boy," she said, kneeling beside him. "What's happened?" Between sobs, Jayden explained. Mrs. Porter's face hardened with anger. "This isn't right. I'm going to speak with Mrs. Cross immediately." She found Marissa in the master bedroom, lounging with a glass of wine and a magazine. "Mrs. Cross, I need to discuss Jayden's chores. They're far too much for a child his age, and those chemicals could hurt him." Marissa didn't even look up from her magazine. "The boy needs to learn responsibility. He's 10 years old. He should be doing homework and playing with friends, not scrubbing floors until his hands bleed." Now Marissa did look up, and the coldness in her eyes made Mrs. Porter take an involuntary step back. "Let me make something very clear, Evelyn. I am mistress of this house now. If you have a problem with how I choose to raise my stepson, you're welcome to seek employment elsewhere. I'm sure there are plenty of housekeepers who would love to work in a home like this and who wouldn't question my parenting decisions." Mrs. Porter's jaw tightened. She needed this job. Her daughter was in college, her husband's medical bills were still being paid off, but she couldn't just stand by and watch a child be abused. "Mr. Cross would want to know about this," she said quietly. Marissa's laugh was cruel. "Go ahead and tell him. Tell him his new wife is making his spoiled son do a few chores. See how that conversation goes." She stood, moving closer. "Or better yet, don't. Because if you try to turn Nathaniel against me, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. I have connections, Evelyn, powerful ones. One word from me and you'll be unhireable. Is that really what you want?" Mrs. Porter left the room, her heart breaking for the scared little boy down the hall. She was trapped, and Marissa knew it. Over the following weeks, the abuse escalated. Marissa seemed to take pleasure in finding new ways to torment Jayden. She'd serve herself generous portions at dinner while giving him barely enough to satisfy a toddler. When he complained of being hungry, she'd smile sweetly and suggest he should have worked harder on his chores to earn more food. She began locking him in his room for hours at a time, claiming he needed to think about his behavior whenever he did anything that displeased her. The infractions were arbitrary and unpredictable. He'd be punished for tracking dirt in the house, for being too loud, for being too quiet, for existing in her space. The verbal abuse was constant. She called him worthless, stupid, a burden. She told him his mother would be ashamed of what he'd become, that he was the reason his father was never home, that he was lucky she tolerated his presence at all. Jayden tried to tell his father during their nightly video calls, but Marissa was always nearby, listening. The one time he started to speak up, she'd pinched his leg under the table hard enough to leave a bruise, all while smiling at the camera. "Everything's fine here, darling," she'd told Nathaniel. "Jayden and I are getting along wonderfully, aren't we, sweetie?" Jayden had nodded, tears streaming down his face, while Marissa explained to his concerned father that the boy was just emotional because he missed him. Nathaniel had promised to be home soon and told Jayden to be good for Marissa. "Be good for her," The words echoed in Jayden's head for days. When Nathaniel finally returned from Singapore, Jayden ran to him, desperate to finally tell someone what was happening. But Marissa had been clever. She'd spent the morning before Nathaniel's arrival coaching Jayden. "If you tell your father lies about me," she'd whispered, gripping his arm so tightly it hurt, "I'll tell him you've been stealing from his wallet. I'll tell him you've been cruel to Mrs. Porter. I'll make him believe you're disturbed, traumatized by your mother's death, making up stories for attention. And then he'll send you away, to a facility where troubled children go. Is that what you want?" So when Nathaniel had asked how things had been, Jayden had forced a smile and said everything was fine. He'd watched his father hug Marissa, tell her how grateful he was that she'd taken such good care of his son, and felt a piece of his heart break off and crumble to dust. The pattern continued for months. Nathaniel would leave for business, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, and Marissa would transform from the loving stepmother into something monstrous. She'd return to her sweet persona the moment Nathaniel walked through the door, and Jayden learned to play his role in the charade. Mrs. Porter watched it all with growing horror, but felt powerless to stop it. She tried to protect Jayden in small ways, sneaking him extra food, tending to his injuries, offering comfort when she could. But Marissa monitored her closely, and any overt interference was met with threats. Then came the night that changed everything. Jayden woke up thirsty, his mouth dry from crying himself to sleep. It was past midnight, and the house was dark and silent. His father had left that morning for a business trip to New York, and dinner had been particularly brutal. Marissa had served herself a feast while giving him nothing but a piece of dry bread, claiming he'd been disrespectful by asking to go to a friend's birthday party. He crept out of his room, moving quietly through the hallways. The kitchen was on the far side of the mansion, and he'd have to pass Marissa's bedroom to get there. He held his breath as he tiptoed past her door, praying it wouldn't creak open. He was almost past when he heard her voice, low and intimate, coming from inside. The door was cracked open just enough that he could hear clearly. "Derek, darling, you need to be patient," she was saying. "These things take time." Jayden froze. Who was Derek? He knew he should keep walking, but something in her tone made him creep closer to the door. "I know it's taking longer than we planned," Marissa continued, her voice honeyed and manipulative in a way Jayden had never heard before. "But Nathaniel is worth $50 million at minimum, probably closer to 70 with the offshore accounts. That's worth waiting for, isn't it?" Jayden's heart began to pound. He pressed himself against the wall, listening with growing horror. "The kid is the problem, I know," Marissa said, annoyance creeping into her voice. "As long as he's alive, he's the primary heir. Everything goes to him if something happens to Nathaniel. But I'm working on it, baby. I'm working on making him miserable enough that he'll do something drastic. Troubled children of billionaires run away all the time. Sometimes they don't come back. Sometimes they have tragic accidents." Jayden's hand flew to his mouth, suppressing a gasp. "Once he's out of the picture, all I have to do is maintain the loving wife act for another year or two, then arrange for Nathaniel to have an unfortunate incident. A heart attack, maybe. The man works himself to death anyway, it wouldn't be suspicious. Then it's all ours, Derek, all of it. We can finally be together, living the life we deserve." There was a pause as the person on the other end of the phone spoke. "Of course I don't care about the brat," Marissa snapped. "He's a means to an end. A very annoying, whiny means to an end. But he's making Nathaniel suspicious with his mopping, so I might need to accelerate the timeline. There are other ways to handle a problem child, ways that look accidental." Jayden couldn't breathe. His stepmother, the woman his father had married to help care for him, was planning to kill him, to kill them both for money. He backed away from the door slowly, his whole body shaking. He had to tell someone, he had to tell his father, but would Nathaniel believe him? Marissa had been so careful, so convincing. She'd made sure any accusations from Jayden would seem like the desperate lies of an attention-seeking child. He needed proof, real, undeniable proof. Jayden made it back to his room and locked the door, his mind racing. He grabbed his phone with trembling hands and opened the voice recorder app. Tomorrow, he'd record her. He'd capture her abuse on video, her threats, anything that would make his father see the truth. He spent the rest of the night wide awake, planning, his mother's face floating in his memory. She would have protected him. She would have known what to do, but she was gone and he was alone. Except he wasn't entirely alone. The next morning, Jayden found Mrs. Porter in the laundry room and pulled her aside. In whispered, hurried words, he told her everything he'd overheard. He watched her face cycle through shock, horror, and determination. "We are going to stop her," Mrs. Porter said firmly, gripping his shoulders. "But we need to be smart about this. We need evidence." "I was thinking the same thing," Jayden said, pulling out his phone. "I can record her, get her saying those things again, or show her hitting me, or the way she treats me when Dad's gone." Mrs. Porter nodded slowly. "We'll need to be careful. If she catches you, there's no telling what she'll do," she thought for a moment. "I have an old phone in my car, a backup. We'll set it up to record video and hide it somewhere with a good view of the kitchen and living room. That's where most of it happens, right?" Jayden nodded, hope flickering in his chest for the first time in months. Over the next 2 days, they collected evidence. The hidden phone captured Marissa screaming at Jayden for not finishing an impossible amount of homework, calling him worthless and stupid. It caught her slapping him across the face for talking back when he'd simply asked for dinner. It recorded her locking him in the pantry for 3 hours as punishment for breaking a glass he'd been forced to wash by hand despite it being far too delicate for a child's grip. But they couldn't capture the most important evidence, her admission of the murder plot. Marissa had apparently finished her conversation with Derek and wasn't making any more incriminating phone calls where Jayden could hear. Then, on the third evening, their luck changed. Jayden was in his room, supposedly doing homework, when he heard Marissa's voice rising from downstairs. She was on the phone again, and she sounded angry. "I don't care if you're getting impatient, Derek. Do you think this is easy? Do you think I enjoy playing house with that pathetic man and his brat of a son?" Jayden's hand shot out for his own phone. He started the video recorder and crept into the hallway, holding the phone around the corner to capture audio. "The offshore accounts are the key," Marissa was saying. "Nathaniel has nearly 20 million hidden in the Caymans. He thinks I don't know about them, but I found the account numbers in his office last month. Once I have access to those, we can disappear. But I need him to trust me completely first. I need to be the grieving widow, devastated by the loss of her husband and stepson." Jayden's hands shook so badly, he nearly dropped the phone. "No, we can't just kill them both at once, you idiot," Marissa continued. "It has to look natural, the kid first. I'm thinking an accident during one of Nathaniel's trips, a fall down the stairs maybe, or something in his food. Then, after an appropriate mourning period, Nathaniel has a stress-induced heart attack. Rich men his age drop dead all the time." She laughed, cold and cruel. "Yes, I'm sure. No one suspects the beautiful, devoted wife. I've been too perfect. And that old housekeeper won't say anything if she knows what's good for her." Jayden had heard enough. He stopped the recording and retreated to his room, his heart thundering in his chest. He had it. He had proof. He immediately sent the video to Mrs. Porter's phone, just in case something happened to his. Then he hid his phone in a new location, somewhere Marissa would never think to look. The next morning, Nathaniel was due home from New York. The plan was simple: give him the recordings as soon as he arrived, before Marissa could intercept them. Mrs. Porter would be there to corroborate everything. Marissa would be exposed, arrested, and Jayden would finally be safe. But Marissa was always 2 steps ahead. Jayden was in the kitchen, trying to choke down the meager breakfast Marissa had allowed him, when she walked in with a dangerous smile on her face. Looking for this, she held up his phone, the one with all the recordings. Jayden's blood turned to ice. "That's mine, give it back." "Oh, I don't think so." She tapped the screen, and Jayden watched in horror as she opened his Photos app, where he'd saved copies of all the videos. "Looks like someone's been playing spy. How long have you been recording me, you little rat?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Jayden said, trying to keep his voice steady. Marissa's expression turned murderous. "Don't lie to me. She hurled the phone against the wall, shattering it into pieces. Did you really think you could outsmart me? Did you think you could ruin everything I've worked for? She advanced on him, and Jayden scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. I know what you're planning, he said, his voice shaking but defiant. I heard you talking to Derek. You want to kill me and my dad for his money, but I have proof. I sent it to Mrs. Porter. Dad's going to see it, and you're going to jail. For a moment, Marissa looked genuinely surprised. Then her face twisted with rage. You stupid, stupid child, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? She lunged for him, but Jayden was already running. He tore through the kitchen and into the main hall, his feet pounding against the marble. Behind him, he could hear Marissa's heels clicking in pursuit. Mrs. Porter, he screamed. Mrs. Porter, help. He took the stairs two at a time, heading for his room where he could lock himself in. But Marissa was faster than he expected. Her hand caught the back of his shirt, yanking him backward. He tumbled down several steps, pain exploding through his shoulder as he hit the edge of a stair. You're not going anywhere, Marissa snarled, dragging him up by his arm. Her fingernails dug into his skin hard enough to draw blood. Not until you tell me exactly what's on those recordings and who else you've shown them to. Let go of me, Jayden tried to pull away, but she was too strong. Tell me, she shook him hard enough that his teeth clacked together. I'll never tell you, tears streamed down Jayden's face, but he wasn't crying from fear anymore. He was crying from rage, from months of pent-up anger and pain finally breaking free. You're going to jail, you're going to lose everything. My dad is going to see what you really are. Marissa raised her hand to strike him, her face contorted with fury. Mrs. Cross, stop. Mrs. Porter appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her phone held up and recording. Step away from the child, now. Marissa froze, her hand still raised. For a moment, no one moved. Then came the sound of the front door opening. Jayden, Marissa, I'm home early, Nathaniel's voice echoed through the mansion. The New York meeting got cancelled, so I caught an earlier flight. Time seemed to slow down. Marissa's eyes met Jayden's, and in them, he saw a wild panic. She released him abruptly and smoothed her hair, her face shifting into an expression of concern. Jayden, sweetheart, please calm down, she said loudly, her voice saccharine sweet. I know you're upset about your grade on that test, but there's no need for such dramatics. Jayden stared at her in disbelief. Even now, she was trying to manipulate the situation. Dad, he screamed, his voice cracking. Dad, help. Nathaniel appeared in the hallway, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he took in the scene. His son disheveled and bleeding at the top of the stairs, Marissa standing over him, Mrs. Porter recording everything on her phone. What's going on here? Nathaniel demanded. Jayden broke free from Marissa's proximity and ran down the stairs, throwing himself into his father's arms. Dad, you have to listen to me. Please, you have to believe me this time. Nathaniel held his son, looking between Marissa and Mrs. Porter with growing concern. Someone better start explaining, right now. Nathaniel, thank God you're here, Marissa said, descending the stairs gracefully. Jayden has been having such a hard time lately. I think he needs professional help. He's been saying such terrible things, making up stories. She's lying, Jayden clutched his father's shirt. She's been hurting me, starving me, saying awful things whenever you leave. She's been planning to kill us both for your money. Nathaniel's arms tightened around his son. Jayden, that's a very serious accusation. I know it sounds crazy, but I have proof. Mrs. Porter has the videos. Please, Dad, just watch them, please. Marissa laughed, but there was a desperate edge to it. Nathaniel, surely you can't believe such ridiculous claims. He's clearly disturbed. I've been trying to help him, but... Show me, Nathaniel said to Mrs. Porter, his voice hard. Show me these videos. Mrs. Porter approached, her hands steady as she pulled up the first recording on her phone. Nathaniel watched in silence as the video played, showing Marissa screaming at Jayden, calling him worthless, slapping him across the face. The color drained from Nathaniel's face. Keep playing them. One by one, the recordings played, the verbal abuse, the physical violence, the starvation, Jayden locked in the pantry, crying and begging to be let out, and finally, the audio recording of Marissa's conversation with Derek, her plan to murder both Nathaniel and Jayden for the inheritance. By the end, Nathaniel's jaw was clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched in his cheek. He looked at Marissa with an expression of such cold fury that even she took a step back. "Nathaniel, let me explain." "Don't," his voice was deadly quiet. "Don't say another word to me. Don't look at my son. Don't even breathe in our direction." He pulled out his phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. "Yes, I need to report an attempted murder conspiracy and child abuse." Marissa's composure finally cracked. "You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am, who my connections are? I'll destroy you." "You're the one who's destroyed," Nathaniel said coldly. "And if I have anything to say about it, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison." He wrapped his arms around Jayden, who had begun to sob against his chest. "I'm so sorry," Nathaniel whispered into his son's hair. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I failed you." "You're here now," Jayden choked out. "You're here and you believe me. That's all that matters." The police arrived within 15 minutes. Marissa tried to run, actually made it to the garage before officers intercepted her. She screamed threats and accusations the entire time they handcuffed her, but the evidence was irrefutable. A subsequent investigation uncovered even more. Derek Vaughan was arrested within 24 hours, caught trying to flee the country. Police found communications between him and Marissa going back 2 years, including detailed plans for accessing Nathaniel's accounts and various schemes for removing obstacles. Most chillingly, they discovered that Jayden wasn't Marissa's first target. Her previous husband, a wealthy businessman in Chicago, had died of an apparent heart attack 3 years earlier. The case was reopened for investigation. The trial was swift and brutal. Marissa's lawyers tried every trick they could think of, but the video evidence was too damning. The recordings of her admitting to murder conspiracy played in court, in front of a jury who looked at her with undisguised horror. She was convicted on multiple counts: child abuse, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted fraud, and several financial crimes. Derek Vaughan received a similar sentence. Both would spend decades in prison. Through it all, Nathaniel never left Jayden's side. He cancelled all business trips, worked from home, and made it his mission to help his son heal from the trauma. They started therapy together, both individual and family sessions. It was a long, difficult process, but slowly, Jayden began to trust again. Mrs. Porter received a substantial raise and a heartfelt apology from Nathaniel for not recognizing the situation sooner. She continued to work for the family, becoming not just an employee, but a trusted friend and surrogate grandmother to Jayden. 6 months after Marissa's arrest, Nathaniel and Jayden were having breakfast together in the kitchen. Not the formal dining room, but the cozy breakfast nook where the morning sun streamed through the windows. Mrs. Porter had made pancakes, and Jayden was actually eating with appetite, his smile genuine for the first time in months. "I'm thinking about taking a step back from the company," Nathaniel said casually, watching his son drench his pancakes in syrup. "Maybe promote Jenkins to CEO and just serve on the board. What do you think?" Jayden looked up, surprised. "Really? But you love your work." "I love you more," Nathaniel said simply. "I lost sight of that for a while. I lost sight of what's really important, but I'm seeing clearly now." Jayden smiled, and it reached his eyes. "I'd like that, Dad." "Good, because I was thinking we could take that trip to Japan you've been wanting. The one Mom always promised to take you on." For a moment, Jayden's eyes glistened with tears, but they were good tears this time. Healing tears. She'd like that. "She would," Nathaniel agreed. "And then when we get back, we're going to make some changes around here. Make this house feel like a home again. Maybe get a dog. What do you think?" "A dog?" Jayden's face lit up. "Seriously?" "Seriously, every kid should have a dog. and every father should be present enough to help take care of it. They finished breakfast together, talking and planning and laughing. Outside the window, the Los Angeles sun climbed higher in the sky, burning away the last shadows that had haunted their home. 3 months later, Jayden stood in front of his fifth-grade class for show and tell. He'd been dreading this assignment, unsure what to share, until his therapist suggested he talk about his experience in an age-appropriate way. "I want to talk about courage," Jayden began, his voice a little shaky at first but growing stronger. "Not the kind of courage where you fight dragons or bad guys, the kind where you stand up for yourself even when you're scared, the kind where you ask for help when you need it." His classmates listened, some of them knowing bits and pieces of his story from news, reports their parents had tried to shield them from. "Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't under your bed," Jayden continued. "Sometimes they're people you're supposed to trust, and when that happens, it's okay to be afraid. But it's important to tell someone, to keep telling people until someone believes you and helps." He looked at his teacher, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I learned that being strong doesn't mean handling everything alone. It means being brave enough to let people help you, and it means never giving up, even when things seem hopeless." When he finished, his classmates applauded. Several came up to him afterward, some to share their own stories of standing up to bullies, others just to tell him they were glad he was okay. As Jayden walked out of school that afternoon, he found his father waiting by the car, right on time like he had been every single day since Marissa's arrest. Next to Nathaniel sat a golden retriever puppy with a big red bow around its neck. "Surprise," Nathaniel grinned. "Meet Shadow. I know we said we'd wait until summer, but I saw him at the shelter this morning and thought he looked like he needed us as much as we need him." Jayden dropped his backpack and ran to them, dropping to his knees to let the puppy lick his face. His laughter echoed across the parking lot, pure and joyful and free. Nathaniel watched his son play with their new dog and felt his heart swell with gratitude and love. They'd survived the darkness. They'd come through the nightmare and found their way back to each other. There would still be hard days ahead, difficult memories to process, healing that would take time. But they would face it together, as a family, the way it should have been all along. As they drove home, Shadow asleep in Jayden's lap, and the afternoon sun warm through the windows, Nathaniel reached over and squeezed his son's hand. "I love you, buddy. I love you too, Dad." It was simple, those 4 words, but they contained everything that mattered: trust, forgiveness, hope, and the promise of a better tomorrow. The nightmare was over, the healing had begun, and while the scars would remain, they would no longer define Jayden's story. He was more than what had happened to him. He was strong, brave, and loved. He was the billionaire's son, yes, but more importantly, he was Nathaniel Cross's beloved child, and no amount of money could ever measure up to that simple, powerful truth. As they pulled into the driveway of their mansion, no longer prison but a home once again, Jayden looked up at the house and smiled. Somewhere, he liked to think his mother was smiling too, proud of him for surviving, proud of his father for finally opening his eyes, proud of them both for finding their way back to the family she'd always wanted them to be. The sun set over Los Angeles in brilliant shades of orange and gold, painting the sky with the promise of new beginnings. And for the first time in a very long time, Jayden Cross felt safe, loved, and genuinely happy. The worst was behind them, the best was yet to come. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our emotional stories. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and don't forget to like this video to help others find this important message about courage, family, and the power of never giving up. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope.